In All right, and welcome everyone. You're watching the Final Report workshop for Elevate and Nexus grants. I'm Jesus Pantel, Cultural Funding Supervisor, joined with the rest of the Cultural Funding team, showing their cameras. Peggy Ellithorpe and I will be leading the Final Report workshop today. Everybody else will have their cameras off, and then Peggy and I will have our cameras on only when we are speaking. This presentation is being recorded. Both the recording and the slides will be available to you on the Create Austin resource page. We are placing a document with all links mentioned throughout the presentation in the chat. The chat has been locked. We ask that everyone uses the Q&A option at the base of your Zoom screen. You can post questions anonymously there if you'd like. So just if you kind of scroll your mouse down at the bottom, there's a Q&A button. You can ask any questions that you may have there in that window. Next slide, please. In this workshop, we will cover all the final report requirements for both Elevate and Nexus grants. We will go over how to submit the report in the submittable platform, point out common final report errors, full review information, and share the final payment timeline. Next slide, please. Cultural Funding Program staff manage the Elevate and Nexus contracts and review the final reports. To determine who your primary staff liaison is, it is based on your submission name and submittable. Please contact your assigned staff liaison first if you have questions. If they are not available, please feel free to contact another member of the Cultural Funding team. Next slide. If you are a collaborator, sponsored project, or a fiscal sponsor, please look for the owl symbol. This symbol will indicate that the fiscal sponsor or account owner must complete this requirement or will require fiscal sponsor or account owner support. All other requirements shared in this presentation must be completed by the sponsored project, or they may also be completed with the support of the fiscal sponsor. For the final report, the fiscal sponsor will need to add the sponsored project as a collaborator to all forms that the sponsored project needs to complete. This includes the Visit Austin submission form, Malls Partnership attendance form, and final report form. Those assigned as collaborators to a form will not be able to submit the form once completed. Let me repeat that. Those assigned as collaborators to a form will not be able to submit the form once completed. This means that once the sponsored project has completed the required forms, they will need to notify their fiscal sponsor so that the fiscal sponsor can click the submit button on the sponsored project's behalf. Next slide, please. So as you can see, there is a owl symbol on this slide. So again, keep an eye out for those throughout the presentation. And to add a collaborator, you want to go to the Forms tab and open the form to add collaborators. All sponsored projects are collaborators and must be added by the account owner. Next slide, please. Let's see. Okay. After you open the form, you will click Manage Collaborators. Please note that collaborators must be added to each of the forms to enable access. The account owner must click the Submit button for each form. Next slide, please. Enter in the email address of the collaborators you would like to have access to the form. You may enter as many collaborator emails as you would like. When all collaborator emails are entered, the account owner must click the Invite button. Next slide, please. Now, let's talk about the final report requirements. Next slide. To ensure your activities remain compliant with the Hotel Occupancy Tax statute, all funded activities must occur within the 10 council districts or extraterritorial jurisdiction of Austin. Events occurring at venues outside of Austin are not eligible, and therefore you may not use city grant funds to support those events. All funded activities must be open and marketed to tourists. To ensure that you meet this requirement, you are required to post your funded activities on visitaustin.com. You are welcome to collaborate with other grantees or cultural producers, but you may not commingle your city grant funds with their city grant funds to produce an event with another grantee. Only one grantee can claim the event on the final report and allocate grant funds towards that activity. Most expenses related to event production are eligible. However, the following expenses cannot be paid for using Elevate or Nexus funds: equipment purchases, and expenses related to hosting a fundraiser or benefits. Please review your contract kickoff meeting recording and the additional program details document for a complete list of eligible and ineligible activities and expenses. Any funds not spent by the end of your contract period must be returned to the Long Center. Next slide, please. Final reports are due 30 days after the last contract activity ends, rounded to the end of the month. For example, if the last public activity ends on July 12th, July 12th plus 30 days is August 12th, and then rounded to the end of the month, the final report is due on August 31st. The latest a final report can be submitted is for Elevate, January 31st, 2026. Again, that's the latest date that a final report can be submitted. For Nexus, fall, winter, in fiscal year 24, the latest date a final report can be submitted is April 30th, 2025. And for Nexus fiscal year 25, May 31st, 2026 is the latest date that a final report can be submitted. Next slide, please. Your final report will require you to complete the following tasks. Provide audience data, including total number of attendees and how many were tourists. Your total project income, including award amount and any additional income received from ticket sales, merchandise and concession sales, individual donations, business sponsorships, or other grants received for the project. You need to complete 2 Miles Partnership training workshops and the associated submittable form. You need verification of Visit Austin postings through the submittable Visit Austin posting confirmation form. You should have 1 form completed per contracted activity. And you need proof of use of the EDD logo and the publicity statement on all marketing materials. As a reminder, the required publicity statement for cultural funding grantees is, this project is supported in part by the City of Austin Economic Development Department. And finally, a completed final report expense documentation form, also known as the EDF. The EDF is where you will itemize your payments and provide proof of award money spent. You may also include a QuickBooks summary or similar accounting software and use the EDF to provide summary information. You are required to upload receipts for any physical cash payments you make. We will go into more detail for each of these items later in the presentation. Next slide, please. You can find a final report checklist in the FY24 Final Reporting Elevate and Nexus folder of the Contractor Library. You can also use the link shown on the screen in the upper right-hand corner. Now, you can use the checklist to double check that you have included all the requirements of the final report. When you click the link, save a copy of the form to your own Google Drive or download the form rather than requesting access to edit the form. And I'll hand it over to Peggy now for instructions on completing the final report.
Thanks. In this next section, we'll go over how to complete your final report in Submittable. Next slide. To get your final report form, you will first need to log into your Submittable account. Visit submittable.com and enter the username and password for your application submission. If you cannot remember your password, please click the Help button on the login screen to reset it. Next slide. Next, once you're logged in, you will navigate to your My Submissions tab and select the submission name of your accepted application. Next slide. Inside your accepted application, navigate to the Forms tab. Under the Additional Forms section, select the button next to the form called Fiscal Year 24 Cultural Funding Final Report. If you are starting the form for the first time, you will click the blue Open button to begin. If you have already started the form, you will click the blue Continue button. If you have submitted a form, but it has been reopened by an administrator for you to make updates, you will click the light purple Edit Form button. The final report form is made available to you after your first payment has been disbursed. If you do not see your final report form, please send a message in Submittable so that we can make it available to you. You must be the account owner to see forms. If you have collaborators or sponsored projects who will help you complete this form, please make sure to add them by using the Manage Collaborator option. Next slide. Next, you'll download the expense documentation form, which is also something we call the EDF, to complete it. Once you have completed your EDF, you will upload it. If you made any payments with physical cash dollars, you must upload those receipts as well. If you claimed mileage on your final report, please upload a completed mileage report. Please note that gas purchases are not eligible expenses, but a mileage report is. We will cover the EDF in detail in the next section. Next slide. The EDF documentation form is where you will itemize how you spent your grant funds from your Nexus or Elevate award. Each individual payment and each recurring payment require its own line with full payment details. Before uploading, double check that you have not left any payment detail fields blank for any of your listed expenses. If you are using QuickBooks or another accounting software, you are welcome to send in that report, which includes the information listed in the EDF in that report. It would need to include the payee name, the date of payment, the form of payment, the memo description, and the amount paid. You can use the EDF as a summary report for your totals. The form has formulas built in to auto-calculate everything inside the form for your total expenses. If you need to insert a row, just highlight the row and then select Insert Row. Then you can just copy the line above and paste it in, which should copy the formulas into the next line. If you have any challenges with this, we're happy to help you. Just drop us a line. Please only submit the EDF as an Excel spreadsheet to Submittable rather than a PDF. We will also accept a link to a non-password protected Google Sheet. Do not submit an Apple numbers file. If you need help converting an Apple or a Mac file to an acceptable format, please contact us and we can help you. You do not need to sign the expense documentation form. Instead, you will attest that all final report materials are true when you finish the submittable final report form. We do not require matching funds for our grant programs, but you may wish to list them in the document if you like. You can find the EDF template in the final report of your submittable application. The template is also available to you in our contractor library. You will need to save a copy or download the file to make any edits. Do not request editing access to the template. Next slide. Okay, let's review how to complete the EDF. Let's take a look at the highlighted pieces of this form. Begin by entering the following information at the top: organization name or awardee name. It should match your organization name. If you are an individual artist, you can just enter your artist name or your legal name. Then enter the award amount. And for the income portion, just provide totals. You do not need to provide backup documentation or proof of income. The earned income section has two sections: admission total, which is where you would put the total earned from ticket sales for any contracted activities. If you didn't sell tickets and it was free, you can just put 0 there. Other earned income is for income related to your contracted activities coming from things like merchandise sales, CDs, t-shirts, concessions, etc. Then the unearned income section, there are several pieces there that you may want to use. The total private support, which is where you would log any income coming from donations or business sponsorships where they paid you money in exchange for logo placement. Total public support is the place where you would put income from any other grants that you received that was put towards the same contracted activities as you are using your Nexus or your Elevate award for. Other unearned income can be income from stocks or other types of income that just don't fall into any of the other categories. And then applicant cash is a place where you can put money that you had on hand that you allocated towards the contracted activity. Your COA award cell is for entering your total Nexus or Elevate award amount, and the total in-kind support is for the total value of all in-kind support you receive for your activities. This would include donated and discounted items or services. These required items have all been highlighted in the presentation, but they will not be that way when you open up the EDF. Next slide. Next, the expenses section is where you will list every payment made with your grant funds. Every time you pay someone, you need to list it on a separate row. Each payment must be on its own row. List the name of the person or the company paid, that's the payee, the date you paid them each time in a month, date, and year format. Then list the form of payment. The memo description should contain information about the services offered and the amount of the funds used to pay the expense, and the right column, whether you use the grant funds in the COA award column, your own cash or cash from another source, or if it was offered to you at no cost, which is the in-kind column. The amount paid can be rounded to the nearest dollar. Make sure every column is complete for every payment that you made. Do not leave the name, the date, the form of payment blank, or your contract administrator will ask you to go back and complete those fields. The name in the payee field should match exactly to the name of the person or company listed in the invoice or the receipt. Payment forms such as automatic cash handling, ACH, Zelle, Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, and direct deposits are all valid forms of electronic payments and can be listed in the payment form box. Signed, dated receipts are required for any cash payments made with dollars and coins. Copies of electronic or cash or check payments should not be uploaded. We only need the cash payments and those receipts signed and uploaded. Next slide. This section is where you will confirm your marketing requirements. If you credited the city in all marketing materials, answer yes and upload event documentation for each grant-funded activity that matches your final report activity summary. Please provide us with one upload for each event showing the publicity statement and logo. If you did not credit the city in all marketing materials, then you would answer no and explain why in the text box. If you only have some of the materials, please upload those materials. Explain why you are not able to provide materials for all of your events in your response in the final report. Your uploaded marketing materials can be flyers, press releases, or social media posts that show proof that you use the required EDD logo and publicity statement for your contracted events. Your uploaded marketing materials should show the following on each document: the name of the event, the date of the event, the venue name, and address if possible. It is not necessary to upload every single marketing file that you created, such as like a poster, a postcard, a graphic file for your website. Just one of those for each event is appropriate. We do ask that you name your files before you upload them, and we will post the preferred file naming protocol in the chat now. You may choose to submit web links to your marketing materials instead of uploading files into Submittable. There should be one marketing sample per public funded, grant funded activity in this part of your final report. Next slide. As a reminder, grantees were required to use the Economic Development Department logo and publicity statement to market all grant-funded events. All grantees were also required to use the following publicity statement on all marketing and publicity. This project is supported in part by the City of Austin Economic Development Department. Examples of incorrect wording would include presented by, produced by, or a production of the Economic Development Department. Next slide. This next step is optional, but very important if you would like to submit images for use in the City of Austin's marketing. The city occasionally uses performance and exhibition images for web and print marketing. If you are willing to share your images with us, please upload them with a signed image release form, which is included for you as a template. If you would like to share a Dropbox or other sort of link, just include that link on a Word document or a PDF and make sure it is not password protected. Next slide. Next, you will complete the grant-funded activity summary table for your public activities. Use one line per public event. It should match the activities listed either in your most recently completed contract change request for Elevate or for Nexus, what was in your application activity summary. You must provide the name of events, the venue names, addresses, activity dates, and whether or not that activity was posted to Visit Austin. Do not include activities that are related to your contracted events that were not open and advertised to the public. Examples of this might be closed rehearsals or planning meetings. Do not list those in the table. You're not required to use all 10 lines. If you do require more than 10 lines, however, please let us know so that we can help you with the additional lines and some additional instructions. Next slide. Complete the rest of the final report questions. You are required to enter information into all fields. The question regarding your total cash income for the project must include your full grant award amount and any additional amounts earned for your project. The minimum amount that should be listed in this response is equal to your actual grant amount, and the same applies to your total cash expenses. Next slide. As mentioned in the contract kickoff, you are required to use specific event submission links for Visit Austin to post all of your grant-funded activities for compliance with the Hotel Occupancy Tax statute to help you promote your events to tourists. You are also required to fill in a Visit Austin form in Submittable each time that you received a confirmation email from Visit Austin about your event posting. Before starting your final report, double check that there is an equal number of Visit Austin forms submitted and accepted in Submittable, that the number of forms accepted matches the number of grant-funded activities listed in your activity summary in your report. If the events do not match the submitted forms, then be prepared to explain this in your final report. If you have not processed your submittable forms with those event posting links, please do that in advance of starting your final report for each approved event submission. Next slide. If you posted all events to Visit Austin and received a confirmation email and submitted it to Visit Austin through the form in Submittable for each link, you can respond to this question with a yes. Thank you for meeting those grant requirements. Next slide. If you didn't successfully post all of your grant-funded activities to Visit Austin, then you must respond with a no and explain why some grant activities were not posted by using the text box, which will open below. If you posted no events or failed to submit the forms in Submittable after you received the approved posting email from Visit Austin, you'll answer no to this question and explain why using the text box. Remember that this was a contract deliverable for all grant programs, and it is important to meet all grant requirements. Next slide. As a refresher, here's how to access the Visit Austin calendar posting confirmation form in Submittable. To navigate, you'll go to the Forms tab, scroll down until you see the Visit Austin calendar posting confirmation, and open that form and fill it out. Fiscal sponsors must give their sponsored projects collaborator access to the Visit Austin form in Submittable. Sponsored projects should complete this form, but fiscal sponsors must click the Submit button once the form is completed. Next slide. This form has very few fields. The most important field is the link to your Visit Austin posting. Please do not open the form and type that you don't have a link for this form, because this will be declined. If you didn't receive an email with an approved link from Visit Austin, please email website@visitaustin.org to inquire about your link. Visit Austin does not hold on to links after they expire, so please be sure to check in with their staff if you don't receive a link within 5 business days of posting your event. Next slide. Now let's discuss the Miles Partnership deliverable. All grantees were required to watch at least 2 of the 7 videos in the Miles Partnership Tourism Marketing Training webinar platform. This training was offered to all Economic Development Department grantees. You can still watch the recordings to complete this grant requirement. If you do not have a login for the platform, please complete the account request form and the link will be provided, and we can drop that link in the chat for you. The videos are available to you in both Spanish and English. Use the toggle, which is circled in green on the slide, to change languages in the platform, but choose the correct videos to watch based on the fiscal year and the language preference. Please watch the 2024 and 25 videos as they are the most recent. You may watch the 2023 videos as well, but please report newly watched recordings or live sessions for this final report. As you watch the recordings, pay attention to the keyword. You will need it to log your participation in Submittable. The keyword for each session is spoken by the workshop leader towards the end of the session. It is also available on the slide and also in the chat file for each session. If you watch a recording that culminates in a QR code and a survey, it means that you watched the 2023 videos instead of the 2024-25 videos. If you did that, the keyword for all 2023 videos is 2023. Next slide. After watching the videos and keeping track of the keyword, you will log your submission in Submittable using the Miles Partnership form. Account owners and fiscal sponsors must allow collaborators to access this form. Instructions to submit a Miles Partnership form in Submittable is in the box on the lower part of this slide. Please note that all bit.ly links are case sensitive. This link will also be in the document that was dropped into the chat. Your grant administrator reviews your Miles Partnership forms in Submittable as you complete the forms. Completed forms will show as accepted on your side when they are approved. Next slide. For the final report question, please answer yes or no. If you answered no, please go ahead and watch 2 required recordings because you will be asked to watch them before we can close out your report. Next slide. Submitting your report. We recommend using the final report checklist to ensure that you have met all reporting requirements. The link to the checklist is in your helpful links document that we'll be posting in the chat. The link is on the slide near the base and it is case sensitive. The link on the screen has capitals C, F, and R in it. If you are a sponsored project, the fiscal sponsor will submit the form on your behalf, as would the account owner for any collaborators. When all appears correct, collaborators and sponsored projects must let the account owner know or the fiscal sponsor know that the report is ready for submission. Account owners and fiscal sponsors must attest that everything in the report is correct and accurate. They can submit the form and the report by clicking on the Submit Form button. If you are having issues submitting your report, scroll up to see if you have not completed one of the required questions or are missing a required document upload. Staff cannot view your final report until you submit it to us. If you would like feedback on your report, go ahead and submit the final report and schedule time with your staff liaison to go over any questions that you have. I will now hand this back to Jesus Pantel, who will go over some common errors in the final report and to close us out.
Thank you, Peggy. All right, so now we will discuss some common errors made on final reports to help you avoid them. In some cases, your assigned staff liaison may contact you with requested revisions to your submitted report. Some common reasons you may need to revise your report include your EDF is not itemized correctly or has ineligible expenses listed. And as a reminder, EDF stands for Expense Documentation Form. Your EDF is missing required information, for example, full date or the form of payment. The orange COA award column on the EDF does not add up to the full award amount. Your Miles Partnership participation was not logged. Awardees must complete the form insubmittable with the correct keyword for each training that you watched in order to receive credit. You did not upload all required documents, for example, marketing or cash receipts, or you used the logo but did not use the publicity statement. Next, we will show some examples to highlight these errors. Next slide, please. To avoid having your final report kicked back for revisions to the EDF, please remember to check the following before submitting your expense documentation form. Ensure the names of the people or businesses paid are listed in the payee column rather than their titles or the services provided. The name should match exactly what is on your receipts for those payments. Additionally, if you paid someone or a business multiple times, each transaction should be listed on its own line, not grouped together in one line item. Ensure the date of payment for each expense is listed, as well as the form of payment. If a payment was made with a check, please provide the check number. And if the payment was made with physical cash, for example, paying someone with a $20 bill, please be sure to upload the signed cash receipt. The memo description column should provide 1 to 3 words describing what was purchased or the services provided. This is a great place to list the titles or roles of the people paid or the types of services that they provided. Next slide, please. Double check that you are not including any ineligible project costs, such as donations or regranting of grant funds to other organizations, the purchase of equipment. However, please note that equipment rentals are allowed. Equipment purchase is not allowed, but equipment rental is allowed. Also ineligible are expenses paid more than 60 days before the start of the contract or any dates after the end of the contract. Food and hospitality expenses that were not pre-approved by city staff, or expenses related to starting a new business entity are also not allowed. And that includes registering your business as an LLC or applying to the IRS to become a 501c nonprofit. Please note that this is not an exhaustive list of ineligible expenses. Please review the additional program details for your program if you need more details about acceptable use of grant funds. Next slide, please. Finally, make sure that your total expenses equals the full amount of your award. You must show that you spent the full award amount, not just what you've been paid so far. If you need the final 10% payment to pay any final expenses, you may list the form of payment for those expenses as final 10%. Next slide, please. When we review your marketing uploads, sometimes we see use of the old CAD logo instead of the EDD logo, which is easy to do as they are very similar. Sometimes we see that incorrect wording was used for the publicity statement, or sometimes we see that only the EDD logo was used or only the publicity statement was used. If your marketing missed these elements, it's too late to fix. Just explain what happened. It's fine to upload what you used for marketing for each event, as long as you explain it in the marketing question. Please only upload real marketing documents. Do not recreate documents just for the final report. We do want to see what you actually used, and there is not a penalty for accidentally using the wrong marketing elements. Consider it a learning experience and endeavor to do better next time. Next slide, please. There are common errors for the Miles Partnership deliverables for your grant as well. If you watched the videos but did not complete the forms in Submittable, just complete the forms before you begin your final report. If you don't remember the keyword or never saw it or heard it, but you prefer not to rewatch a recording to get to the keyword, you can log into the learning platform, access the 2024 to 2025 lesson files for the webinars that you watched. The keyword will be inside of the chat log for each webinar. The 2023 video recordings do not have a keyword. If you watch a 2023 video that culminates in a QR code and a survey, it means that you watched the 2023 videos instead of the 2024 to 2025 videos. Next slide, please. When you click on the form, you will be prompted to enter a keyword related to the video you watched. Each video will have its own unique keyword for you to enter. Every session for 2024 to 2025, for every session for 2024 to 2025, the keyword is spoken by the presenter, shows up on a slide near the end of the presentation, and is posted in the chat file. Again, for 2023 sessions, the keyword is not in the recording. Fiscal sponsors, please use the Manage Collaborators option at the top of the page to give your sponsored project access to this form. Next slide, please. The Cultural Arts Funding Program has begun randomly selecting a few grantees to participate in full grant contract review process. Not all grantees were selected for a 100% review. We have already notified those who were randomly selected for a full review. The full grant contract review process consists of a public event site visit, a program check-in scheduled at a day, time, and location of your convenience, and a full review of your final report. A full review of the final report will entail a detailed look at your final report submission, particularly your expense documentation form, or EDF. Your grant administrator will schedule the full review of your final report after your final report has been submitted. During the full review meeting, we will ask you to provide proof of payment for a few of the expenses listed on the EDF to verify information reported in your final report. We will also request documentation to verify audience numbers and review the method of data collection. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. Next slide, please. The Long Center processes payments every other week. Final reports should be submitted at least 8 business days before a payment run. So this means that on the Tuesday, a week before a payment run, your final report should be submitted to allow staff 5 business days to review. If your final report is submitted correctly with all the required information in the correct format, then you may expect to have your final 10% payment issued in the next payment run. Be aware that if your final report is missing information or is not completed correctly, it is possible that your final report will not be approved in time for the upcoming payment run. It is important to keep an eye on your inbox after submitting your final report so that you can quickly make any corrections requested by staff to ensure a timely final payment. If you have questions or concerns about your final report, please consider reaching out to your assigned staff liaison for support. Next slide, please. Once your report has been approved by your assigned staff liaison, staff will notify the Long Center to process your final award disbursement. Please allow up to 30 days for the payment to be deposited into your bank account or for the check to arrive in your mailbox. Next slide, please. Please contact your assigned grant liaison if you have any additional questions, or visit us during our regular open office hours on the 2nd and 4th Tuesday of each month from 10 a.m. to noon. We are always on Zoom and are also available in person at our offices. The links to join the open office hours are included in the helpful links document that was posted in the chat. And we will now take questions that were posted in the Q&A.
The first question from the Q&A is, for events that are unticketed, do you have any advice on how to respond to audience questions, particularly total audience served, as well as number of state, national, international tourists? Since our events don't require purchase tickets and anyone from the public can attend, it would be challenging to track this accurately.
Sure, a couple of options there. One is if you use like an online ticketing service like Eventbrite or something like that, even though it's free, you could collect the information that way. So that way it's kind of like an RSVP, you get a head count. So that's one possible option. You could also do surveys at your event. So just, either pencil and paper or, electronic surveys. Maybe you entice someone to, get a free ticket to the next show, or, depending on your art form, something that's maybe relevant, maybe some swag. So something like that, those are a couple of options. Peggy, Meyer, anybody else? Additional thoughts, Peggy?
Yeah. I got that question via email recently, and so I created a document that's in the contractor library right now that talks about various ways you could go about it. We don't dictate exactly how you do it because everybody's events are different. The example I like to give is that Some theater groups send their actors out into the crowd with like golf pencils and surveys where they're asking not just our marketing questions, but also the marketing questions that interest them, about how people maybe found out about their event, so they know who's in the audience and who they're still not bringing in, and helps them with their own marketing plans. Then others might have such a small event that they could quickly do like a show of hands. And the questions to ask are in that document, but very quickly they are, have you traveled more than 50 miles one way to get to this event? And that's a state tourist. And have you traveled from out of state? Then that's an out-of-state tourist. And have you traveled from outside of the United States to come to this event? That's your international tourist. You can also do a survey after the fact if you collect emails, but there's a multitude of ways to do it. And every event is different and has its own way of operating. And so that's why we don't really dictate how you go after this information, but it should fit into the vibe and the flow of your own event. But we're happy to talk to you about it. Just reach out to your grant administrator and we're happy to walk you through it on some options.
Great, thank you, Peggy.
Yes, thank
Next
you.
question.
I did see someone asking for that document, so I'll make sure to add that to the helpful links document in a second.
Great, thank you, Maya.
So the next question is, from the contract orientation session I attended, I have a note that reporting all these income categories are optional. The note they put was, do not need to input anything besides how we spent city's money. Can you please clarify?
Yes, great question. So in the contract orientation session, the budget there is your proposed budget for your activities. As was mentioned earlier in the presentation, we do not have a matching requirement, but that has the City of Austin award column, a cash match column if you do have any additional income you'd like to, or expenses you would like to include, and then an in-kind column. So that was in reference to that, you know, for the 10 or 12, however many different line items, you do not need to put city money in each of those line items. And same thing for the expense documentation form. You don't need to fill out every single, you know, maybe you don't use some of the line items, but any of the line items that you do need to use, that you do use, you want to fill those out. So hopefully that helps clarify that. That all income categories are up. So, you know, with the expense documentation form, we're more concerned on the expense side. But again, you don't need to, we only want the relevant income and or expenses listed in the expense documentation form. Peggy, additional thoughts on that?
So yeah, I think that it's important to understand who your audience is when you're filling out a final report, budget, or expense documentation. It's us. And so we are required to look at how you spent the city funds on the expenses and make sure that they are eligible expenses. So some organizations might choose to use all of their grant funds or the majority of their grant funds on artist payments or on space. So you're not required to use every single line item, as Jesus Pantel mentioned, but also just keep in mind that if you use the in-kind column, we don't have to verify that because we're not verifying, because there's no match required. So we don't have to verify the in-kind column or anything that is not the the COA, the City of Austin award column, which is the orange column in the EDF. But yeah, it's just the audience. Like when you're doing an application, you want a very robust budget because your audience is a panel. But when you're doing the final report, it's us, and we want to help you get your last 10% and move through that quickly.
The next question is, if you have more than 10 events during the contract term, should you combine multiple flyers into one file?
Maya, you want to go ahead and answer that question?
Yeah.
Is that what that note is there? Sorry.
No, that's fine. You can definitely do that. If you have more than 10 events that you'll be proposing or you'll be logging, in your final report, you should let us know now so that we can also add additional what are they called, cells, additional lines to that contracted event table in your final report. Right now it's just set at 10, but we can always up that. We just need to know in advance. So send your staff liaison an email and we can make sure to update that, but you can definitely combine them into one file. Next question, can you confirm that we are able to just put a summary total of each amount in the EDF if we are attaching detailed records from accounting software?
Sorry, couldn't unmute. Great question. Yes, so the EDF is modeled off of a QuickBooks report form. So if you're using QuickBooks or similar financial software, then yes, only in that case is it okay for you to do a summary in the EDF because you have the QuickBooks report or similar financial software to offer that information.
And in a kind of similar vein, someone asked, if we have all the EDF breakdown in, I guess, their own Google Sheet, can we submit that itemized breakdown to replace the template? And Peggy had answered this, but then they provided additional context where they said, it's not a new doc, it's a living document that we track and detail all of our expenses throughout the planning and execution of an event. It has the same categories and more as the EDF template.
It should work. If you want to share it with your grant liaison in advance, just to make sure all the details are in there, do that in advance.
Yeah, I agree with what Peggy said there. Just share with us just to be sure. It sounds like, you know, the way you're doing it now, it would be easier to just share that. As long as it has all the information that we need, then it should be fine. But just you may want to check with us beforehand. Or even after you submit it, you know, it's fine to do it at that time if you just want to submit it all in at one go and then just let us know you submitted it and you have a question about that. But in general, it should probably be fine as long as it has all of the information that we need and can also, it's pretty similar layout, so we know where to look. Because in the event this gets audited in the future, any auditors, you know, they want to be able to look to, you know, find the information, you know, in as quick manner as possible. So
if we had to reschedule our activity past the report due date due to inclement weather, how do we best navigate that?
Peggy?
I'll take that one. Yeah. So anytime there's a change on your dates, venues, or the nature of your events, you always want to keep your grant liaison in the loop, and you would want to submit a contract change request, which enables you to change things like the events dates, the venues, locations, because we have to verify that you're still within the contract period for your new date, and we also have to verify that you're still in the Austin Council districts or extraterritorial jurisdiction of Austin. So if you are getting reminders that your final report is due, but you haven't had your event yet, that means that there's a conversation that needs to happen in Submittable where you would submit a contract change request form, get that approved, and then your grant administrator would then change your due date to match when the last date is of your actual contracted event.
Great, thank you, Peggy.
The signed receipt only applies for actual cash payments, is that correct? For example, for Venmo payments, would a screenshot of the transaction be enough?
So yeah, two-part question. So yes, a signed receipt only applies for actual cash payments. It's not like Cash App or Zelle or Venmo or anything like that. And we do not need a screenshot if you do Venmo or, you know, Zelle or Cash App or something like that. Just fill out the information in the expense documentation form. Again, it's modeled after a QuickBooks report, so in the event it should get audited, you should still keep all of your receipts and all of your, you know, financial documentation. It's just that, hey, on such and such date, you paid X amount of dollars to Y person for these services. And so if we have a question about that in the future, we can go and easily find that information. So, so only cash for actual cash payments. And we don't need a screenshot of the PayPal payment or the Zelle payment or Venmo payment. Just put it in the EDF.
When I read the EDD marketing requirements guide, it does not say that the logo and statement need to be used on all marketing materials, but are a bit more specific. However, the question on the final report feels different. The question asked, did you credit the city of Austin in all your marketing and publicity materials? Can you please clarify this? It's hard to use the logo and statement on, for example, social media reels.
Okay, so our team understands that where you usually can put a logo and a publicity statement, we know that social is not one of those. So as long as you have the logo and publicity statement on the website where the event is being promoted, or on the Eventbrite or any other ticketing platform, and you also are including it in any printed materials, maybe in a program if you do programs, your posters that you're putting up, or postcards, to the extent that that's possible. We do want at least one marketing document uploaded for each event you do that shows that you used the logo and the publicity statement on it. And so you can actually answer that honestly, even if you didn't include those things in social media or really tiny advertising, it's totally fine.
Is there a way of seeing the amounts that have been paid out within my submittable profile? Awards and payments say transaction history are not available.
Can you take that one?
Yeah, I
think you
don't
would know
think
more
that's
about that.
possible on y'all's side. You could send a message through submittable and ask the Long Center to give you that information, but I don't think it's readily available in your submittable at the moment. I think this was already answered. If the expenses I proposed in my application end up being different over the course of the project for the COA award, how do I handle this in my final report? I thought I would spend $500 on rent, but I ended up finding a free space so I could hire an extra performer for the same amount.
Well, I would say that that's probably fine, but I would recommend having a brief message back and forth with your contract administrator, grant liaison, just to make sure that, like, if you're not spending the money on space, that whatever you are paying for still falls in the range of eligible expenses. But in the example you gave, spending less money on rent and more money on artists, that's something that is fine to do on your final report. But if you're concerned about whether or not that's eligible, do check in with your grant administrator because we can help you navigate that.
Yeah, and just following up and kind of what was mentioned earlier, if there's any other kind of changes, yes, fill out the contract change request form and submittable, but you may also want to reach out to your grant liaison as well, just to make sure all the things that Peggy mentioned earlier, that it's still in, within Austin city limits or the extraterritorial jurisdiction, it's within the correct dates, all that kind of thing. And so same with any payments, make sure it's an eligible expense and not an ineligible expense. It appears that is all of the questions. If anybody has any more, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. I think we're going to see if we can also enable the raise hand feature. If anybody would just like to raise their hand and ask a question, you don't have to do that. You can post it into the Q&A. It's 4:55, so we do have a bit more time if you need it. We're happy to stay on for a little bit longer. If not, have a good rest of your day. But if you do have any questions, we'll stay on a couple more minutes just to see if any more pop up in the Q&A. So thank you, everyone.
Yes, the presentation will be available. We're going to have a recording on the Create Austin resource page. It'll probably take about 1 or 2 weeks to get that up though. And we should also have the slides available, and we'll make sure to put that helpful links document there as well. So yes.